Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Take It or Leave It show. I am your host, Dr. Charles Handler, and today I have an amazing guest who is Nancy Doyle, founder of the Genius Within and Neurodivergence Expert. And together we're going to review a couple of articles about neurodivergence, and we're going to give our take to Take It or Leave It.
This episode of PsychTech at Work and the Take It or Leave It show is brought to you by Rocket Hire, guiding clients to success with predictive hiring tools and talent assessment since 2001. Dr. Charles Handler, founder of Rocket Hire, is the unparalleled expert in talent assessment, offering deep market insights and vendor-neutral guidance that empower clients to navigate and execute on the complexities of AI, predictive hiring tools and assessments with confidence. Through Rocket Hire, Dr. Handler's services include assessment strategy and vendor evaluation, technical services such as job analysis, validation, and bias studies, market trends research and analysis, education on best practices, AI, and regulation. Visit rocket-hire.com to learn more and get in touch.
Take It or Leave It show. Here it is. The danger of neurodiversity. We'll take just a quick look at the TLDR from this article, right? It challenges the neurodiversity movement, which views autism and similar conditions as natural variations rather than disorders. The author himself was, basically saying that if you're on the severe end of this, it's diluting the challenges that you might have. So, people who may be less on the continuum spectrum, diagnosis, whatever, they're detracting from the people who really do have more pronounced problems. And this may lead to people kind of blowing off the idea that these people need help. And of course, in the workplace, which is what we focus on, it may really again obscure what the most difficult side of this are. And so really people are risking not being able to help people who are most in need, especially in the workplace or whatever. So I am going to let you give your take on this, Nancy. What do you think?
I think it's a valid critique. Yeah, I genuinely think it's a valid critique. I was a little bit offended at some of the language in the article. I didn't think it needed to be so angry and vociferous. It could have made the critique without saying that people whose experience is different are wrong. It also had a bit of a sexist point in there that most of the proponents of this are women, and that's not actually true. There's lots of male neurodiversity advocates. In fact, I would say some of the leading voices are either currently male or were assigned male at birth. So it kind of shows an unfamiliarity with the neurodiversity movement. But I think it's a valid critique. We've installed the idea that neurodiversity is about having magical, mystical work fairies that will come and do all the boring IT work very accurately and at speed. And that kind of generalization and stereotype of the particularly gifted white male, middle class, North American cishet coder it has permeated and it has detracted from other experiences, but I would say all other experiences of neurodivergence, not just the experience of the autistic people who are also learning disabled or who have severe epilepsy, but the experience of Black and brown autistic people, the experience of female autists, the experience of autistic people living in the global south or in East Asia. That stereotyping isn't helping anybody except the people who are already likely to do the best out of this movement as it was. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think it's a really valid critique, but I'm slightly perturbed by some of the language in the article. I think it's unnecessary. The critique is strong without being derogatory about people.
Yeah. So my take is this is a frustrated individual with an agenda because he's had to deal with this for a long time. And so he's venting a little bit. So to me, I got to take that into account. It's interesting about the female part of it. I remember when we were talking, you were saying something about a very high correlation or relationship of people who are trans and being neurodiverse. So I'm curious, just really quickly, summarize that. This is a good spot to talk about that, even though we're in the middle of our little show here. So,
Sure. Population studies looking at neurodivergence in trans communities indicates that around up to 30% of transgender people are autistic, which is very much higher than the general population, where it's sort of anywhere between 1 and 3%. When you look at trans communities and the autistic people in trans communities, there's no difference between assigned female at birth and assigned male at birth. The gender differences disappear. So there's kind of plenty of reasons that we could suspect, that's one of them, that the gender differences in autism are created rather than innate. The experiences of female autists tend to be that our behavior is more overcorrected for women in terms of compliance and inspiring social communication. The diagnostic criteria, one of the diagnostic criteria in the most famous autism assessment is, I love to collect details about things, for example, birds, planes and trains. I mean, we, as a psychometrician, we can also overlook the fact that we put examples in an item and what a terrible practice that is. But even if we overlook that, that all of those are male typed items. So there's lots of reasons why there's gender differences, and they're really flaky. There's no good reasons that are inherently biological. So yeah, that's my take on that.
Cool. So you tell me, thumbs up, thumbs down on this one.
Oh, I can't pick. It has to be both. It depends.
Ah,
I think
okay, gotcha.
in general the critique is valid, but I think that the style of putting that critique across is unnecessarily inflammatory. And my concern about the reason I can't sign it off with a thumbs up is because what it will do is its job is to legitimize discrimination against neurodivergent people who are managing to be in workplaces. And actually, even though those people you might think, well, they're standing on privilege because they're being in workplaces, neurodivergent people who are functioning in society have higher rates of suicidality, higher rates of mental health distress, much higher rates of insomnia, self-medication, substance misuse than the general population. It is stressful being a neurodivergent person. So the needs are different. They are then, we don't want to get into the oppression Olympics, whose needs are the worst. Everybody that is neurodivergent who is trying to fit into a neurotypical world has some kind of difficulty doing that. It's it's not easy. It's just a different kind of hard.
Mm,
So I don't want to judge.
gotcha. Gotcha. So you're
Mm.
one up, one down. I'm just going to take the viewpoint of a lesser educated person who reads this article and says, geez, this guy's kind of right, I reckon. Didn't really think of it that way. You don't think about people who are severely autistic even in the workplace a lot of times, which it's good to be reminded of that, And so I think as a layperson who doesn't have your background, it's a positive. It's a positive thing, or a positive article anyway, right? So that's the
Mhm.
summation. We had a half upsy downsy and one upsy from me. So let's go on to the next article, which is the Rise of Neurodiversity at Work is the name of this, and is in Psychology Today. Basically, here it's saying, hey, companies are appreciating the unique abilities and perspectives of neurodiverse folks and neurodivergence. And even businesses, they're being inclusive about how they're hiring and accommodating these people. So, despite that, they still may not be getting the job done and things may be misguided. And here's how they might, misstep is that they're really like maybe focus too much on getting people integrated into the regular workplace as opposed to accommodating their actual needs. And they give a little prescription here of, to truly benefit from this, you've really got to tailor strengths to better support the needs of neurodivergent individuals. So I'm very interested in your take on this one. I can't necessarily guess what you're going to say.
Well, again, I could go both ways on this one. I think its negatives for me are the kind of promotion of some fairly tokenistic inclusion programs on behalf of some famous tech companies as the kind of ideal of neuro inclusion. So I think it has embedded within it the right critique, which is this isn't where we start, people. This is a well, It is where we start. It's a pilot project, but it shouldn't be where we stop. This is not, and we've been doing this for years. So I think SAP's first program in 2007. We're in 2024. SAP's program still doesn't have more than it's got less than 1% of its staff on this program, and the population prevalence of autism is 1 to 3%. So it's not even mirroring. And this actually goes back to your other guy's article. And that's because the population prevalence of autism includes the autists who don't have the right skills to work in technology. So, they're not necessarily what we should look at. And my other critique of those programs is a bit more intersectional. I just think we wouldn't do other diversity and inclusion that way. So if you imagine, you're sitting in a business and you're like, we need to improve gender inclusion. We've heard women are really good multitaskers, so let's get some project managers who are women. Or you're sitting there going, well, we need to improve race and ethnicity diversity. We've heard that Chinese people are really good at math, so let's get them into the finance team. Like, you wouldn't do it that way. And you know why? It was because it would be illegal.
Yeah.
And you would be sued if you did that,
Right.
and they would win. So, but for some reason, we do think it's okay to do disability inclusion with these token projects, in which the individuals coming into them have automatically, by virtue of getting a job, disclosed something about themselves, which is protected, confidential medical grade data, which may affect their ability to get promoted, to become a manager, to get a reference for another job where they might not want to be on the autism team. They might want to be, in the architecture design team, just doing regular stuff. So I think they're problematic. And so I'm not a massive fan of them. So the article does two things. Number one, it talks about them as a sales technique, as if we should all be like falling down because some clever tech companies have done this thing. So that means we should all do it too. But the article does have that little thing at the end that says, well, actually, isn't this about more than a label? Isn't this about functional performance of everyday skill? And that's where I agree with it.
Gotcha. So my take, again, not as in depth or probably multi clever, I guess, as yours, but the way I look at it is, I feel like there's probably a lot of overemphasis on the neurodivergence washing or whatever, where companies, as you mentioned, talk about doing it because it's the right thing to talk about. And if we look at DE&I efforts, we know it started with, here's a training videotape that you have to watch. It's gotten better than that, but it's still a struggle and maybe not executed as well as you'd like. And I think that you look at the volume of people going through these programs, it's pretty infinitesimal, right? They're not really scaling these programs very much, which to me, again, and are they getting the right people to help create these programs, to help really, do people really understand that, right? And so I think from that standpoint, it's like, sometimes it's hard to tease apart your feelings about the article and the subject matter. That's something I've kind of struggled with on this. So I do think the article is good at, I think it glosses over some of those things, even if it talks about, hey, here's how we got to do it better. They're kind of obliged to do that, right? I mean, it'd be crazy to ignore the positive side of it or the way that companies could deal with it. I just don't know enough about, are these really going to be the correct ways to do it? I don't know enough about the reality of this. So to me, I would say, you know what, this is celebrating the fact that companies are doing this more than it's providing a cautionary tale. So that's how I think about it. So what's your vote?
I think you've summed that up nicely, actually, Charles. And I'm going to go with a down vote on that basis. I think the promotion, if it was better balanced, I would give it a balanced result. But because I think it does over promote what these companies are doing.
Gotcha. Me too. That was my thought. Was a no on this one. So whether we agree or not, you got a nice shirt coming at you.